Have you ever set a goal and not been able to complete it or even really make any headway or maybe even get started on it? Let's say you had a goal to quit sugar, to exercise more, to get to bed earlier and get more sleep. And maybe you do it for a few days and then you fall off, or maybe you don't even get started. What is going on with that? Basically, what's happening is it is in our brain. So that's how we get around it. So it's not necessarily you need a brand new different program, you need a magic bullet or anything like that. It's all in our brain. Those things can help, but you'll always go back to what your brain is doing, and that is the ultimate solution. So let's talk about how we can handle this and what actually happens, and a three-step framework to be able to outsmart your brain. So essentially, the thing to know is that we all have two brains. So we have our primitive brain from caveman times, and we have our evolved brain that helps to make future decisions. So when we're making our goals, we're using our evolved modern brain. So we know, we need to quit sugar. We can kind of see our future, where we're going if we don't make some changes and what will happen. And we can, with our modern brain, make some decisions and say, okay, I don't want that to happen. I need to make some changes. I know exactly what I need to do. Here's what happened. Here's the steps I need to take. So that's all great. And that's using our modern evolved brain. But we forget about our caveman brain, and we forget to take that into account. So let's take an example. Good morning. Let's take an example. Let's say, for example, you're trying to quit sugar, and we know we need to, control this sugar, but then you get to the party or whatever it is that you're going to, and you're distracted and your favorite treats are there. This is often what happens, and tell me if this is familiar. So this is the conversation that happens. Tell me if you've had this conversation. You say, I really want that cookie. So the caveman, so there's two different brains in your as a part of your brain. So there's the caveman brain, and then there's your evolved brain. And this is the conversation that your two brains are having. Your caveman brain says, I really want that cookie. And your evolved brain says, no, we said we weren't going to do that. And your caveman brain, oh, come on, just one won't kill you. You know it won't be just one. No, no, I promise, I promise. I've been so good this week. I deserve just one. And then your evolved brain says, "Okay, fine, just one." And then you eat the cookie, and then your caveman brain says, "Okay, just one more." And your evolved brain says, "What? What did I just say?" And your caveman brain is like, "No, no, it's totally fine." And then pretty soon it kinda just devolves, and you're like, "Well, I've already ruined the plan. I'll just start tomorrow." So, if you does that conversation sound familiar to everyone, to anyone? So, if you're here listening live or on the replay, you can drop live or replay if you're listening to a replay. But does that sound familiar to you? Is that a same conversation that happens in your brain? And also, what does that caveman brain sound like to you? Does it sound a lot like a 3-year-old? Does it sound a lot like a toddler? It for most people, it does. It does sound a lot like a toddler. So, that's basically what happens is our evolved brain makes the decision, and then our toddler brain is usually what is making the decision in the moment. So in that very moment, and especially if things are stressful, oftentimes the evolved brain goes offline and the toddler brain is running the show all by itself. Woohoo! So has anyone had that experience where the toddler brain is just like totally running the show, doing whatever they want? So that is what happens. So, how do we get control of this with the caveman brain and the evolved brain? So, obviously, making a plan is the right direction. Making a goal is the right direction. We need those goals, but we need to take into account our caveman brain. And our caveman brain in the moment is really just, all about pleasure, avoid pain, make things as easy as possible. That's really what the caveman brain wants to do. So we need to be able to take some of these things into account. So the first step of the three-step framework is number 1, you do need your goal. So you do have to have the big goal, and that is your evolved brain making the goal. That's great. The other piece of it is that you need to do more planning. So you need to be doing, for example, say daily planning. When let's say, for example, every single day you do a little bit of planning and you know the next day you're going to this party and you have this goal that you're working on to quit sugar or significantly reduce sugar. You need to be able to plan for what are you going to do at this party. You need to acknowledge that the 3-year-old toddler brain is going to be at that party. And so what do you do? So just like with a real 3-year-old toddler, you might do some planning and some coaching beforehand of here is what we're going to do. You might do some redirecting. So as you may have experienced if you've been around a 3-year-old, that telling them what they can't have is really going to set you up for them asking about it constantly. So if you redirect them to what to focus on, what they can have, what is fun, what is awesome, that they may forget about the thing that they were asking about altogether. So concentrating on how awesome this party is or how fun you're having or the people that you're seeing or go fill up on, these healthy things or eat before all of those different things. We want to redirect that caveman toddler brain, and do that. And then we also want to take into account how the individual personality of our caveman brain, of our own toddler brain. So there are each of us has ways that our toddler brain behaves and things that really set our toddler brain off. And just like with a real toddler, you know these things. Most often, you do know these things and you can be aware of them. So, if, for example, with my son Jack, he's not 3, but he has some aspects of that. I know that if we're going into a situation that's going to be really loud, that I can prepare him for that, that I can give him solutions for that, that we can make a plan around that very specific trigger. So you need to know exactly what you we will do when a food pusher, is asking you about, "Here, have this cookie," and you've made this resolution, or it's Aunt Edna's favorite cookies that, what are you going to do? You need to have a plan. Are you going to have it and make an exception for this one thing? Or are you going to say, no, this is what we are doing? So that's your 3-step framework. You need your big goal, you need to plan on a daily basis, and then you also need to know how your own toddler caveman brain works and what specific things do you need to put in place that are going to have come up for you in this particular situation. So just like with a toddler, you may notice that when you're really inconsistent with a toddler, so you may have experienced this yourself, or you may have observed parents who are doing this. When they're really inconsistent, it gets so much worse. Um, you can't have it, and it seems arbitrary. In that arbitrary situation, we know for the toddler, they're going to ask like 100 times more because it's so inconsistent. It's like, pulling the wheel on the lottery machine. Maybe it's this time I'll get lucky. I have no idea what the rules are. And the same is with our caveman brain. The less we plan, the less we kind of have guidelines for ourselves, for our brains, then it's going to be we're gonna have that conversation even more, 100 times more. And over time, as we're consistent with toddlers and they realize she never gives in this situation. She never ever says yes in this situation or to this thing. They eventually stop asking. They do eventually really, really consistent. When you have that 3-step framework and you're really consistent with it, the toddler eventually says, "This isn't worth my energy. I'm gonna give up. I'm not even gonna bother asking about this anymore." And then there is peace. then there is peace and you are not having this argument all the time. And for us in our brains, that means there is peace in our brain and we're not having this argument with ourselves all the time either. So that three-step framework, once again, is you need your big goal, you need to have some daily planning to see what's coming up on the horizon and prepare your mental toddler for what is coming, and then you need to know the specific strategies that your mental toddler is going to need to handle the situation. So I'd love to get your feedback on this. Is kind of a new training that I, came up with. So I'd love to know, does that make sense for you? And do you think you could apply it? Or what other questions do you have? Okay, I'll be seeing you in the group.